This is episode 22 of the Equestrian Author Spotlight. I'm Carly Kade, and today I have thriller author Connie Hambley on the show. Connie grew up on a New York dairy farm. After receiving her law degree, she moved to Boston and wrote for Bloomberg Businessweek, Nature, Mass High Tech, and other media outlets as she honed her skills of reaching readers at a deep, emotional level with great research, laser-sharp focus on detail, and persuasive writing. Her high-concept thrillers feature remarkable women entangled in modern-day crimes and walk the reader on the razor's edge between good and evil. Connie delights in creating worlds where the good guys win, eventually. Her short stories, Giving Voice and Black Ice, won acceptance in Best New England Crime Stories, Windward and Snowbound, respectively, published by Level Best Books, and The Brew was published by Mystery Weekly magazine. The third book in the Jessica trilogy, The Wake, joins The Charity and the Troubles. Connie is a two-time winner of Best English Fiction Literary Award at the Equus International Film Festival in New York City. She is president and featured speaker of the New England chapter of Sisters in Crime, a member of Mystery Writers of America, and a board member of New England Crime Bake. Now, let's get into the interview. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Carly Kade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. Hi everyone, welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight Show. I'm Carly Kade, and today I am so excited to have my author friend, Connie Hambley, on the show. Hi Connie.
Hey there, Carly. Good to see you. It's been so long since I've actually had a chance to talk to you, because the last time we saw each other was at the Equus Film Festival in New York City a couple of years ago now, and it's great to see you.
Oh, it's so good to see you too. And I'm so excited to have you here today and talk about your adventures in writing horse books. And yeah, the last time we did see each other face to face was 2016. I mean, we've been staying in touch and following each other and seeing what's going on. But yeah, it's been a while since we've talked. So this is going to be an exciting interview.
It is. And I have to say that you won Best Western Fiction. I had won Best English Fiction. And I've been keeping tabs on all that you've been doing. And it's so exciting to watch your writing career flourish.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And getting that feedback is so special, particularly from another author that I totally respect, who's also an award winner. So thank you for saying that. And I'm so excited to share with the listeners more about you and your books. So we're going to hop into the interview here. I had a lot of fun galloping around your website and pulling together and doing research for the questions that I sent over to you. And one of the things that really made me smile was your website introduces you as saying, what happens when a Boston lawyer decides to chuck her career out the window to write fiction? So tell us a little bit about that decision to leave law. That's a big deal, and pursue a career as an author. Like, this is what started everything for you, right?
I know. And first off, I have to say that my parents weren't exactly thrilled when I decided to chuck over a law career and a career in banking to go into writing fiction. And not to disparage my brethren in the legal community, but there are a lot of similarities between writing really good fiction and writing the law. Mm-hmm. And I've done a lot of talks out there about how when you're trying to craft a really great story, and as well as craft a really great legal argument, what you're doing is you have a world in your head, and as well what's in your head doesn't mean anything. It has to get onto the page. But even getting onto the page isn't enough, because you want that story or that argument, legal argument, to bloom in your readers' minds, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very important to get that illusion down on paper. And with a legal argument, what you're doing is you're using precedent, you're using that reader's bias or the prosecutor's bias in such a way that you're pulling them into your narrative. And that's exactly what we do as authors. You know, we have a world in our head. We know that what we're writing is really only half the battle, because what we want is to spark all of those emotions and all of those feelings in our readers. And I've always said that my most critical reader is like opposing counsel. You know, they're going to get me, you know, that one thing that's wrong, or that one piece of the story that doesn't quite hold together, man, they're going to be there for it. And as well, So yeah, being a Boston-based lawyer, mostly in the financial world, and then coming into the writing world, it's so different, but it's also kind of logical when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, listening to you explain that makes so much sense. And you know, they do say like a good law argument is like almost like a performance or a story that hooks the jury or the judge or what have you to help influence decision. And that's what you do when you write fiction. I mean, you know what I mean? So that was like a cool way to think about it. So was it when you left law to pursue writing? I mean, you have all those skills as a lawyer. That's a lot of years to spend at school. Then it clearly upsets your parents, right? To move into writing fiction. Why? Were you just disillusioned with being a lawyer, or were you like,
no? Well, you know that when it comes to writing and becoming an author, sometimes it's really not a choice. Sometimes something burns inside of you so brightly that you just have to get it out. And that's really what happened with me. I had a decent career, but there was always this buzz in the back of my head that, I tried a lot of different creative career outlets, as far as getting involved in different teams or different disciplines, whether it was marketing or investments, etc. But there was always this vibration in the back of my head. And finally, I decided, okay, I'm going to give myself the gift of time. I'm just going to, focus on writing. And within probably 6 or 7 months, I had the first draft of my first book. And it was just a really cathartic almost process. I had never really experienced anything like it before. And as an author, you know that once you tune into that passion, it just keeps on going. And so I gave myself that gift of time, and I said, I'm just going to see.
Well, good. Yep. Look at what you've created. I mean, and we're going to get into the success that you've had around your books here in a second, but like, good for you for following that buzz. I do believe that like it's almost like our soul or the universe tells us like we know what we really want to be doing with this one beautiful life we have, right? And good on you for following that, right? So many people ignore that feeling or ignore that pull, and like that pull is the thing that you're actually supposed to be doing with your life. So you stepped right into that, and you gave yourself that gift to put this thing down on paper, and look what it's bloomed into, which is what we should probably get into here, right? So
sure.
Yeah. So tell us about your horse books. Talk to us about, and I'd like to understand why horses, right? So tell us about your books and why, books that are based around horses. Why that?
That's which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
First off, I grew up around horses. I've always had horses. I grew up on a dairy farm. I always had horses in my backyard. English hunting, flat work, fence work. Those were my disciplines, unlike Western disciplines. And I really do believe that being, living a variety, doing a variety of things in your life, a writer's brain is like a junk drawer. Everything pulls into it. So when this character popped into my head, she immediately was in the middle of the horse world as a world-class equestrian. And I knew exactly who she was. I knew her biases, her fears, her loves. I knew everything about her. And then I also knew that I'm a mystery writer and a crime writer. So my 3 books that feature world-class equestrian Jessica Wyeth unfold the story of Jessica, who was falsely accused of murder, and as she was clearing her name, she uncovers the business and the money behind a terrorist cell, and it's a Boston-based cell of the IRA. And the horse world comes into play in so many different ways that I wasn't fully aware of when I wrote book 1. But as I got to, started to write more and more, book 2 and book 3, I completely filled in the details and the suspense and the story points with all of these different nooks and crannies of the horse world. So being a world-class equestrian, she doesn't even have to be world-class equestrian, but I think that makes it interesting for the readers. It puts them into a different world and lets them rise up a little bit in their equestrian aspirations, because not everyone is a world-class equestrian. And also putting it into the horse world, I was able to humanize her, because sometimes horses were the only, there's my kitty.
I love that. We're with authors, like, so those of you not watching us on YouTube, Connie's cat just walked behind her and curled its tail right around her head. And it's so funny, in so many author interviews I've been doing, this occurs. Like, our furry friends will come into the room and like kind of hang out behind, because we can't write without them, right? So obviously that's their writing companion. I love that.
That's right. That's right. And also you have to know that she's going to be a bigger pest if I lock her out of my room out of my office than if I just let her do her thing.
Okay. So we were talking about, your books, and you made her a world-class equestrian because it gives people something to aspire to. And you were talking about how, like, you when you were first writing, you weren't sure that the equestrian stuff was going to come in, but it sort of started showing up, and then it became a part of the story.
It's very true, because first it was a part of the story as far as setting was concerned. It was a beautiful horse farm up in Hamilton, Massachusetts. And it was almost an equestrian park with fences, and it was just, the setting came to life and who she was. And then also the horse piece came into play as far as who Jessica was, that sometimes the horses were the only beings she could confide in and really understand her. So there was that connection, that you were able to unfold a tale by using the horses as part of it. And as an equestrian, you have a good day, you have a bad day. That horse knows what's in your heart the moment you walk into the barn, and it's just amazingly freeing. So Jessica had that aspect as well. But also I used it in the first book. As I said, she was accused of murder, and she went into hiding. She assumed a new identity. But the one thing she couldn't hide about herself was her affinity, skill, and passion for horses. And she changed her discipline. She went from, doing some light fence work into hunter pace and hunting. And it was her skill and acumen in a major event that made people recognize her. They said, wait a second, there's only one person I know who could ride like that, who could do that. And that was this young lady back in Massachusetts. And from that moment, of being recognized, then obviously the story had even more layers to it. Wow. But that was another funny way of using horses.
Right.
And what I do in each book is I feature one horse discipline. So in the first, it was thoroughbred racing, which is what her family did, and hunting. And then in the second book, it was steeplechase, which is kind of like hunter pace on steroids. And then in the third book, it was therapeutic riding and therapeutic horsemanship, because then as my life progressed, I became a a volunteer at a therapeutic writing center.
Mm.
So I wove in just the amazing transformations I saw in people with the equine therapy, etc. And that too became, another thread. So when you ask, how did your, horse world impact your writing, and then my writing also impacted my horse world by what I was. So it's just been an amazing journey, and it's been so much fun to meet people, accomplished equestrians themselves, and also those, maybe we'll call them hopeful equestrians.
And I love this because you are lit up. Like, this is the whole point of being alive and being a writer or following whatever passion is there for you. You are lit up by the work that you're doing and the books that you're writing. And I can resonate. And this is how I felt about you the first time we met, like how lit up you were about just writing and meeting other writers and the horse world. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more, obviously, about your books, because this is the Equestrian Author Spotlight. But do you have your books there? And can you hold up the covers of your books for folks that are watching us on YouTube? And
I sure can.
Yeah, tell us the names of your books, and tell us, your covers are unique. Can you talk to us about how you came up with the idea for your covers as well?
Sure. I'll hold this one up. And this is the first book, The Charity. And that's a barn fire, which is a terrifying thought for anyone with horses or animals. And then you see a shadowy figure here. So that's the first book. The inspiration for that cover is, as I said, I grew up on a dairy farm, and my family was a target of an arsonist when I was a young child. And I have images that I can share with you later about the barn on fire, etc. And it was a cataclysmic event for the family, as well you can imagine. Not only having their livelihood burned to the ground, but also knowing that you were targeted, that it was intentional, you were a victim of a crime. So the barn fire was something that really also infused my story with suspense and infused drama into the story. So that's why I felt it was really important to do that as the first. And then as I got to know the characters, and as you might know, writing your books, you get to know your characters a little bit. As I said, Jessica uncovers the tale of the business behind a Boston-based cell of the IRA. Well, you can't have the IRA without having something in Ireland. And if you know anything about Ireland, you know that they had a very recent, between Northern Ireland trying to get their independence from the United Kingdom, England, that you go to Ireland, and that period of strife was called the Troubles. So the second book is called The Troubles, and it takes place over in Northwest Ireland and in Northern Ireland. And as people will know, that once you go to Ireland, there is a tremendous affinity with horses there. There is a tremendous history and culture and skill set embedded in the people there. So it was a logical transition to go from, I see her in the background.
The cat has reappeared.
The cat has returned. Sorry about that, folks. But
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. But anyway, it was a natural transition to go from a tale based in Massachusetts and in Kentucky, horse country, then to bring those characters over to Ireland, because as Jessica unfolds the tale, she begins to understand how her family is tied directly to the Troubles. So it made sense to go deeper into the history of that time, and then also to bring the books forward into Ireland. Then the third book is the Wake. And if you do know Ireland and the lore of Ireland, you know that the rose is a very symbolic flower as far as the protest songs and the protest poetry and literature within Ireland. So the rose is very symbolic. Also, all of my titles have dual meanings, where the charity is not that charitable. The troubles is the troubles in Northern Ireland, but it's also troubles of the heart, because we're beginning to question, has Jessica fallen in love with the right person? Is this the right, troubles of the heart, troubles of the family? So it goes deeper into that. And then the wake is something that, well, if you've ever seen or learned about an Irish wake, you know that it's part of keening and sorrow, love and song, laughter. It has all of these different things to it. But it also, the wake is the turbulence behind a boat. So a boat can be on smooth water, but behind it is all of this turbulence. So the wake has these two meanings. It's love, laughter, keening and sorrow, and then this turbulence after the event. And then how does that settle?
I love that. I love that dual meaning. That's really cool. I think that's really unique and thoughtful and very deep, obviously. I wanted to ask you, on the covers of the books, there are not any horses on the covers of your books. I was wondering, did you choose that intentionally, or was that recommended?
I did. Well, I have to say that on the back of each, you have, so this is the troubles, and then you have stone circles in Ireland, and the steeplechase and stone cottage. And then, as I said, on the third, you have therapeutic riding. You have the horse in a wheelchair, Boston Back Bay. And then, I don't know if you can see this, but it's a woman holding a rifle. And this is in Belfast, an actual news picture from a woman fighting for her freedom in the streets of Belfast. So I do have horses, not on the front covers, but on the back. And that was very strategic, because I'm also not necessarily a pure horse book writer. I write crime, as I said, I write crime, mystery, and thrillers too. And there is something in the book world, as you might be familiar with, that, boy, once you get niched into a genre, you are in that genre. And I felt that these stories weren't just for horse lovers. And if people thought of them as horse books, they might think of them more as young adult or something a little softer. And my books are on the edgier side of that. So I did not feel comfortable putting a horse on the cover.
That makes a lot of sense, but you did pay homage to the horse on the back cover with some pictures there. And I think a lot of equestrian authors do, even though the horse is so important to them, they do aspire to perhaps maybe one day, branch out of the genre and write broader, or maybe write something without a horse. I don't know. I've thought about that too, because there are a lot of us that are writing across genres and not always writing just about horses. So that was a very, very good strategic move. Now, you talk a lot about in this particular book series about Ireland and some of the things that are going on there, and how she gets kind of tangled up in this. Now, so how did you research that? I mean, this is fiction, but obviously there's got to be a research element to this novel, because you're writing about something that actually occurred, correct?
Yes, I did. First off, I used a lot of family history to come into it, as far as stories of immigration coming over from Ireland, etc. But I also did a lot of research on the timing involved, what was going on behind the scenes. But it's not so academic or historical. What I really wanted to know was how these historical events impacted the women. And that to me was very important, because not only is this a horse story and solving a murder and suspense, etc., but it's also the tale of a mother and daughter. It's really a multi-generational tale. So as the mother was brought up in these really difficult economic times, not only for the men to be unemployed, but also difficult for women. And if you are a woman with a young child, or pregnant and maybe not married, or what the family story is, what are the decisions that you make to protect that child, and how does that decision impact then the lives, not only the lives of the mother, but the lives of the daughter that happens. So a little spoiler with that, but it was, the research involved was more to understand how the history impacted these people, not necessarily, what went on with, the Good Friday Accords or whatever the event was, but the bombings, the people, the motivations are very, very true. In fact, the first book, The Charity, was one of a handful of fiction books that actually made it onto it was a securityinfo.net website, which is a website clearinghouse for terrorism and counterterrorism books. And the reason why, I know.
Whoa.
I know. And the reason why was because I understood the motivations for what brings people to the act of a crime. Well, how passionate do they have to be in order to enact a crime? And then what happens on the other side of that, post-traumatic stress and repressed memories. And, so it was the webmaster, the organizers of that website said that rarely did they read a book that really captured the razor's edge between good and evil, because you have to think that if you are a freedom fighter or you are a terrorist, what name you call yourself or what name you are called really is a point of view. To us, you might be a terrorist, but to someone else, you're a passionate freedom fighter. So that gray area of good and evil, I found very compelling, and I plunked one of my characters right in the center of that. And then that's how you get to question, is Jessica in love with the right person or not? What are the forces that are going to pull this person? Are they going to be pulled to the freedom fighter side, the good guy side? Or are they going to be pulled into more of the dark terrorist side? And what are the forces at work at that person? And what happens when you're in love with that person?
Wow, that is so intriguing. And then, okay, so how did you research that? Did you set up interviews with people that had been through these experiences, or did you read other, biographies, or how did you do this?
I did a lot of reading of Jerry Adams biographies. So I understood that. In fact, there were a couple of real life stories that were absolutely inspirational to a few scenes I wrote, such as women and young children, those big prams, those huge prams with the baby carriages with the big wheels. Well, in one scene that Jerry Adams wrote, and I was inspired to write something similar, that underneath where the babies were lying with their stinky diapers were food, guns, ammunition, bandages, medicine. And they knew that as soon as the soldiers came and they saw this wet, stinking, crying baby, they weren't going to search in that pram anymore. So off they went through the peace line and were able to then smuggle in the needed supplies. So the research came with reading autobiographies and also talking with people. As I began to delve into the Irish networks within Boston, I would talk to people, and I learned things like when people wear a t-shirt and they say 26 plus 6 equals 1. Well, they're talking about Ireland and Northern Ireland, the 26 counties plus the 6 northern counties of Northern Ireland equals 1 country. And, that's a very passionate feel. So I listened very carefully, not only to the building blocks of history, what was happening when, but also how it impacted the people. And that's what I wanted to bring to life, to how would it impact someone living without the ability to fend for their family.
Yeah, that is so fascinating and well done. And thank you for taking us through, what was compelling you to write this book and how you did your research. So with all that information, and obviously this is a fictional, trilogy, but is there a message in those novels that, because you touched on a lot of things like a woman protecting your child, that edge between good and evil. Is there one thing or a message in your novels that you hope your readers walk away from after they've completed the trilogy?
If there's one thing, that's a good question. And I think that there really wasn't one message to come across, but actually, when I think about it, maybe if I could distill it down to one, and that is the power of fate, the power of faith. It is not, even though Ireland is a highly Christian nation, of course, it's not just a Christian message that comes across. What comes across is placing your worries in the hands of another power, to feel the presence of something else working on your life that is outside of your own. So if there's one message that comes across, I have to say that it would be that good prevails, that there are more things to this life than what we see.
I like that. That is very, very cool. So it's almost like being, kind of like coaxing people to sort of be in tune with more than that's just going on in here. Like there is this outer world that's impacting us, and to be aware of that. I love that. That's so cool. I wanted to shift a little in the conversation now, and you're just phenomenal. I'm so having fun with this interview. As I was going around on your website again, I noticed that you do participate in a lot of events and conferences. In fact, you mentioned earlier in the interview, we met in New York City for the first time at my first Equus Film Festival, and have had this cool relationship ever since then, which is really exciting. But and at the Equus Film Festival, you've been a 2-time winner of the Best English Fiction Literary Award. So way to go! You're an award-winning author. But how do you learn about the events you attend, and how has being a part of events, because you do more than just horse events, but how has being part of these events benefited your author career? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. First off, I'm a tremendous advocate of getting involved in very robust writing groups. I am the president of the New England chapter of Sisters in Crime. And Sisters in Crime is a national organization that has over 4,000 members to it. It's actually an international organization. And they promote women authors and diverse voices in crime and mystery writing. And being involved in New England in this community has been a tremendous benefit. Sisters in Crime just rises all voices up. We're everything from New York Times bestselling authors right on down to folks who are, maybe they're just passionate readers, or there's someone with an idea buzzing around their head. And what I found about being involved in these organizations and being an active member, not just paying your dues and sitting back and letting it happen, but being an active member, that you learn about things, you learn about different events. So I have been featured speaker at a lot of different literary festivals around here. I was just at the largest one so far is the Boston Book Festival, where I held a panel for 5 different authors, again, all New York Times bestselling authors. And that was wonderful. I mean, Boston Book Fest gets around 25,000, 30,000 folks during their 2-day event. So it's just this thriving event. Might even be higher. I'm not quite sure how many. Then everything from a literary festival in Woodstock, Vermont, and different speaking engagements. And once you start doing those things, that then you find that the events come to you rather than you seeking out the events. And that's, I guess, if your audience is avid readers, that's wonderful, but I'm sure that your audience too includes authors with either a few books under their belt or looking to, promote their own. And for me, part of my author platform, if you will, is speaking, but not just about me. I firmly believe that a rising tide floats all ships.
High five. I believe in that too. My digital high five.
There you go. And so I firmly believe that being a member, being a president of Sisters in Crime, and really woo-hooing all of those authors out there and giving them, every opportunity to speak. Go to libraries, go to book groups, go to different community events. When you are able to do that, I consider it paying it forward. And it comes back to you, but it doesn't come back to you necessarily in, oh, I got an event for her, so now she'll get an event for me. It doesn't. It comes back in just that warm reward you get from being a part of a community. And I firmly believe in all of that. So it's another hours worth of conversation when you want to talk about promotion and what it takes, etc. But as I said, part of my author platform is supporting others. Very much so. Very much so.
Well, I love that, and I think that we've got a really group of good people that love horses, that are writing about horses. I mean, we all support each other, and like that, that's a big thing. I believe in it too. Authors unite, please. We're stronger when we work together to support each other. So good on you for taking care of your fellow authors, because being an author is hard, and sometimes it's isolated and you feel maybe by yourself, but there is a community of people out there to support you, whether you're beginning or you're like way down the road. Like, we all are here to take care of each other. I love that. Something else that I found really intriguing from a marketing aspect and a promotional aspect when I was looking around your website is you attend book clubs in person or via Skype.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about how an author can prepare for a successful author book club event, and and sort of why that's important for you in your author career?
Well, book clubs are easy. Book clubs hardly need any preparation whatsoever, because after all, you wrote the book they're reading, so that's the easy part about it. And maybe the biggest preparation is, do you want Chardonnay or Pinot Grigio? I mean, that might be the hardest decision of the night. So for preparing for that, it's basically just making yourself accessible. So many times I meet readers and they're almost intimidated to meet the author. And it's like, well, what are we doing? Are we, have our feather boa and our cigarettes on long, the long handle thing? No, we're just regular people. And I think that to prepare the best is to make that host or hostess just feel welcome and just feel a part of the whole journey. I've spent many delightful evenings, talking to people in living rooms and libraries, etc. So preparation for book groups specifically is easy. If I'm a member of a panel, so there is someone asking me questions, that also is easy, because you want to understand the theme, the moderator sets up the messaging, etc. So that's easy. It does take some preparation because you want to know your other people involved. And again, it's never about just me. It is also about them. I want people to know that I'm aware of their careers, their most recent book, the most recent cool thing that happened to them. Thank you, Facebook, for keeping us all plugged in, and Twitter for that. But so that's easy. But then when it comes to being a moderator or a keynote speaker, and I've been keynote in several writers' conferences around New England, that's preparation. Because not only do you need to know your panelists, but also you need to know your audience. What do they expect to hear? What do they need from you? And so preparing to be a moderator is difficult. And then preparing to be a keynote is a whole nother thing, because then you are the one there for that 90 minutes, and you need to make sure that they are getting content. And you have to make sure that the content is digestible to them, because they're hearing it. They're not necessarily seeing it. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. One of the keynotes I did was the legal constructs of writing a good mystery, which I touched base on just a little bit at the top of the interview, and then unfolded that to say, a legal brief has 3 distinct sections. Well, a really well-crafted novel also has 3 acts, and they're very similar in what their constructs are. So anyway, but you really want to understand very clearly what your message is, what your audience is expecting, and then deliver. And if that means that you're practicing in front of a mirror for 2 days ahead of time, then that's what you do.
And I would imagine that and you are so right. Like if you are selected to be a keynote or to give us a speech, do the work, show up prepared, show up polished, and you're probably going to be nervous, right? Like all the more reason to know your audience, know your topic, know your speech, so you can be a little more relaxed in your preparation, right? It's so very important. I imagine that your experience in law probably helped you be an excellent presenter to readers groups, or you're fantastic on this podcast or as a keynote speaker, because there's that element of performance to delivering a good law. What do we call those? I know.
And now you're going to know, this is something that no one knows about me at all, Carly.
Oh my.
Is that when I was a little girl, I was incredibly shy. Even meeting grown-up aunts and uncles, it was just, I would shrink back and not say anything and kind of, hi, and that was it. And well, that's changed. So the law career, what that did, that my legal training helped strip away my writing and get to the core of what I was saying, and then how to build up to that message. That was the strip of my legal writing. And then my other careers in really financial marketing and sales, that's when I honed presentation skills. So
awesome. Isn't it great how for some of us, our corporate background and our training has really enabled us to work for ourselves and sell our own books.
Absolutely. Well, as I said too, the writer's brain is like a junk drawer. Everything goes into it, and you never know. You're going to reach in the back and all of a sudden pull something forward, and it's going to be just what you need. So
exactly. I love that analogy, the junk drawer of the mind. So I wanted to ask you too, I'm sure listeners are going to be curious. What do you prefer, to self-publish, or are you traditionally published? Like which route?
I'm a hybrid publisher. So I'm both independently published and also traditionally published. And there are benefits to both. So I really couldn't say, oh, you can only be traditional, or, oh, you can only be, and I say independent versus self, because as an independent publisher, you are a publisher with all of the skills and team behind you. So I say independent publishing versus self.
I prefer that as well. I think that is the truth, and that's what we're doing here. The hybrids, or we're independently published, just like there's independent film, just like there's independent music, indie artists. We are independent. We are not self, right? So
that's exactly right. And then, before I launched off into my fiction career, I had been a featured columnist for Bloomberg Business Week and some other Nature, Biotechnology, some other periodicals where I certainly had writing chops, if you want to say that. So that was, I mean, I understood the drafting process, the editorial process, the meeting reader expectation process, etc. So then when I transitioned into publishing, it was very easy to understand, what it was going to take in order to be, to put out a good quality manuscript, to put out a good quality book. And then also on my traditional side, when an editor says, have you thought about approaching a scene this way? Well, you know what? Listen, because that editor knows the industry and knows what's going on, and they're also a reader. So if they wanted that scene approached differently, there's something there. I know a lot of authors who have gone the independent route and reject that kind of editorial feedback, and that's at their peril. So, getting a great relationship with a top editor is better than having your own tutor, your own writing tutor, because it's a practice of a craft. It's a craft. You're always working on it. So there's always something to be learned.
And I think that is actually sort of where the future for authors actually lives, is in this hybrid model. So I think we're seeing more of that happen. And I think that independent publishing, like I always say, and I've said this, probably 100 times on this interview, but with independent publishing comes great power, right? So you have to be responsible for the product you're putting in the world. And you have a lot of power. So you have to make sure you're delivering the very best product. And that does mean working with editors, working with graphic designers, having, beta readers, and listening to feedback, right? So you have to be responsible for that end result.
Right. And that's very interesting when you say, listening for that feedback. Initially, I wrote The Charity as a standalone. I thought that was it. It was just going to be book one. Then my readers asked me, well, what happened next? What happened to these two people that you put together? And I knew the answer, but I also knew it not through one book. I knew it, got me into writing a third. And I said, that's it. It's going to be a trilogy. I can't just have these, characters live in my life so much. But then what's very interesting is, for my own personal career, I have actually 2 more books written, and I am really looking at those as more of a traditional piece. Now that I have a very good platform, I have a readership, etc., I'm veering off a little bit more into traditional.
And I think you touched on a really great point there too. I think, I used to work in the music industry. I was an artist development representative for Sony Music and then Universal Music. And what we looked for, because we were the distribution arm, right? So what we looked for as things changed and grew is somebody that had established a brand and a following, right? So a lot of independent authors, they're building a brand, they're creating a following, they're creating readers. And then I think the traditional publishers are starting to look for, because now the expectation is that as authors, we do all the marketing, no matter whether we're independent published or traditionally published.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Yeah, we do the marketing ourselves. So if we're bringing value to a traditional publisher through building a brand and a following of readers, then I think there's more inclination toward traditional publishers now to sign an author, right? But then on the flip side, as an independent author, when you are signed, you give up some control over how things go with your book, right? So how is that for you? Because I mean, you obviously have a law background, so like what to look for in a contract to make sure you're not signing away things, right?
Right. And I'm a very unique beast in the sense that I know how to market. I know how to do the business side of things as well as the creative side of things. And sometimes I wish I could get rid of the business side and focus a little bit more on the creative and vice versa. But a couple of things. First off, you mentioned author brand.
Mm-hmm.
And my brand is that I write tense, twisting thrillers with a strong moral code. So no matter what I'm writing, whether it's a new series that I'm writing, or even whether it's my short stories, there's a right that comes out at the end of it. And that's part of, my author brand. And then when you're doing your marketing, and you're so right, because you're marketing yourself, whether you are traditionally published or independently published. It's going to fall on you, whether you've got a contract for 5 books or not. At a certain point, when that catalog has run its course, and most publishers put out a catalog seasonally or biannually, when that catalog has run its course and they start to market the next one, well, guess what? You're not done marketing your book. What do you mean you only got 8 weeks or 6 months worth of publisher attention on that? It falls on you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to know what is going to be required of you. And that author brand is very important, because when you know that author brand, then everything you put out in those airways stays on message, and people have a good sense of who you are. So even when I'm talking about, the business side of of publishing, or about the history inside my books, readers get a sense that, oh, okay, this is a gal, she's smart, she talks smart, she writes smart. So yeah, I'm going to spend some time in her pages. That sounds kind of funny, but that's what we do.
That makes so much sense. I mean, to stay on brand is important, and you've done a very good job of creating that, whether you're writing books with horses in them or not. Somebody who loves those books that comes maybe from the horse world will also enjoy your other books, because you write true to what you've created for yourself.
Well, and it's funny, because as I decided to write my new series, I had mentioned that I had volunteered at a therapeutic writing center.
Mm-hmm.
And have phenomenal stories about that experience. But one population that I worked with were women survivors of human trafficking. So they were using equine therapy to regain a sense of control and personal power. And we did mostly groundwork. And you can imagine, even for someone who has not been traumatized by a life event, having this massive animal respond to you, even with emotions you might not be completely aware of, is a really phenomenal experience. And I was there just to be the horse handler, to make sure the horse didn't do anything expected that would impact these women as these women went through their therapy session with a therapist there, etc. So I listened to their stories, and Carly, I was absolutely blown away. I was absolutely blown away, because it completely shattered what my perceptions of what human trafficking is, who is involved in it. And immediately you think human trafficking, oh, they're drug addicts, oh, it's third world, it doesn't happen here, etc. But one of the women that I worked with was born in Western Massachusetts, not a drug addict, but what her mother was. And basically her mother was, yeah, take the kid off my hands. I'm can't. And that's how this child got into the trafficking network.
Oh,
and I was
goodness.
blown away. I mean, so many different stories came up, and I was absolutely galvanized by this. So that became the trigger and the spark for the new books that I'm writing now.
First of all, thank you for your contribution to these, to the therapeutic writing and to these women, and for listening to their stories and giving of your time. I mean, that is so huge. And it's just, it breaks my heart to hear just that one story. And I'm sure there's plenty of others. And one of my questions, actually, as we're starting to wrap up the interview, is what are you curious about right now? And you just mentioned, this new series that is kind of based off of what you've been exposed to through the therapeutic writing volunteer time that you're doing. Can you expand just a little bit more on what you're curious about and where you're taking that?
What I'm curious about right now really is the trafficking business inside of New England primarily, and what that looks like, and who's involved in it, et cetera. So I'm really curious about how to shatter the preconceptions that I had, how to shatter those preconceptions in my readers. So that's what I'm evolving to right now. I've written a few short stories that have gotten published in Mystery Weekly and some other areas, and a couple of them have been sparked by trafficking ideas too. So always I find that thread of equestrian or therapeutic horsemanship, I find it so interesting, and I really do think that the general population of the US are very interested about this right now, and it's coming up more and more. With that, I think I just read something that war veterans, military veterans have now been approved through their health insurance to get therapeutic riding experience or equine therapy based. And that is fascinating. So I really feel that staying in that vein, in a sense, to be true to author brand and who I am, et cetera, I think that that's going to find a thread in a lot of my writing. And actually, as I'm thinking about this, in the wake with therapeutic writing, this actually got an endorsement from the CEO of the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship International.
Wonderful.
She read this book and just was thrilled because it's a mainstream thriller. It's not a horse book per se. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
And it captured what therapeutic writing is on both sides. Someone who's involved in it as a participant, as a writer, and someone who is looking to coax the best out of that writer in different ways. So it saw through both. And I will give a shout out to Windrush Farm, who gave, that's where I do my volunteer work, and they also gave permission to use their name in the book itself. So it's kind of fun. As people read it, they're like, I know that place. I know those people. So that's kind of fun. So what I'm curious about right now is that you might know that Clint Eastwood has a new movie coming out right now called Richard Jewell, who was the individual that was falsely accused of the Centennial Park bombing at the 1996 Olympics. The reason why I mention that is because, again, in the wake, it revolves around that bombing at Centennial Park, and how there was a rush to justice to find the person, to pin that bombing on someone. And
wow.
Mini spoiler, well, I won't. No, no spoilers.
No more spoilers. Read the books. You got to read the books because it's like this fascinating journey through like all of these topics that we've talked about, which is so awesome. And thank you again for volunteering your time to therapeutic work. And so the series that you're thinking about next that will explore some of these stories in human trafficking and the beautiful work that equine therapy can do for people. See, like the equestrian, I've read an article that horse people live longer than the average person that isn't interacting with horses, and our secret is getting out. They're healing, they heal you, right? So we want that message out there. These are beautiful, emotional, connected, beautiful animals that help us work through so many issues that we're dealing with in our life. So thank you for putting a spotlight on this. So is it going to be like a fiction series, or is this going to be?
Yes, it'll definitely be fiction. So So stay tuned. So stay tuned on that. I'll circle back. I'll let you know when it comes out.
I was going to say,
I'll circle back.
please do. I would love to have you back on the show to talk again about where you're heading with your career and to talk about this series and explore this topic, I think, in a little more depth, because I think this is something I agree with you. We should put a spotlight on this and tell the stories and get information out there for under both realms, right? What it's like to be human trafficked and how that happens to people. And I can't believe that that's happening in this day and age, but it is. And then the power of working with a horse and the therapeutic benefits of being around someone who is educated in equine therapy, right? So I would love to explore just those topics with you a little bit more when you get a little further along with your book series.
That in and of itself would be a whole show. I have tremendous stories about my experiences there, and
let's do it.
And again, that's a way of paying it forward.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about equine therapy and therapeutic horsemanship, it's absolutely not to promote my books at all. It's to get the word out about how transformational it is. So it's something that I am very passionate about and would love to talk more about it.
Let's do that. We will certainly circle back, and I will have Connie on the show again so we can explore where she's taking her next book series and talk about this topic a little bit more deeply. And I wanted to say too, that is the beautiful thing about being an author, is you can put a spotlight on things and you can tell a story and you can give readers escape, but you can also, I think, offer something that gives people an opportunity to think in a different way about things that are going on that you're close to, but that can also change perceptions and how people think about things. And you are doing that so obviously. So I want to say thank you for being a guest on the show today. You have shared so much awesome information and also set the stage for us to have a follow-up conversation, which is fantastic. But will you tell people where they can find you and your books to learn a little bit more about you and what you do?
Sure. Obviously the books are out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, ebook, paperback. It's under the Jessica trilogy, so you can find it there, but you can also find it on my website, which is, I'll say it and then I'll spell my last name. It's ConnieJohnsonHambley.com. And Hambley is spelled H-A-M as in man, B as in boy, L-E-Y. So ConnieJohnsonHambley.com. And once you get onto my website, there's a wealth of information about events that I'm doing, books that I have out, other short stories that I'm having published, etc. And then also on Twitter, very active folks, follow me on Twitter at Connie Hambley. I'm also on Facebook, so you'll find me Pinterest and also my blog. But once you get onto my website, then I have the social buttons. I also have short stories published in Best New England Crime Stories. So these are traditionally published, and anthologies are fun. I don't know. There you go. Anthologies are fun because it's like a chocolate sampler. You get the chocolate box and you've got all these different flavors, and you want coconut or you want caramel nougat, and that's what the anthologies do.
Connie, you're fantastic. And I will link to all of Connie's social channels and her website and her books in the show notes, so you can go there too to get easy access to all those links. But yes, Connie's website is very good, and you can get to all of her different places and learn more about her on her website. I think I spent a while spinning around there because there's so much awesome information and great things to read, including a story that she had written about the arson that had happened on your dairy farm as a young person. So that was, I read that, and that was a great adventure in and of itself. And I'm sorry that happened to you and your family.
But it sparked a lot of ideas. So it's, this many years later, the pain has faded, and now you just take from it what you can.
And that's the thing. Everything happens, and you were able to use it as a writer and remember that, like you have the power to overcome, and these tragic things that happen, the pain seems to go away after a while. And then we can take those ideas and we can create something from them, or we can create things that help other people, right? Which is exactly what you're doing with your writing too, with the therapeutic writing and the stories you're telling there. So Thank you so much for the gift of your time, Connie, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Carly. So long. Great to see you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlykadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlykadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlykadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Kade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.